So hello, welcome to the video and welcome again to Bogota. Just arrived in on a domestic flight from San Andres, and in a couple of hours I'll be continuing on up to Mexico City. Flying today on Aeromexico in their business class cabin, and I'm really quite looking forward to it. I'm about 3 hours before the next departure, so I'm going to wander across and find the check-in desk and see if they're open yet. So if you'd like to see what Aeromexico's mid-haul, it's about a 5-hour flight, service in business class is like, stick around.
Hi, I'm Matt. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.4 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So subscribe to see where I go next and perhaps get some inspiration for your next trip. So into the terminal, and the Aeromexico desks weren't open. I always like to interact with the check-in team as it's an important part of the flying process and it's the first impression you get of an airline. But I had no bags to check and was disinclined to hang around, so I used the automatic terminal that was available and managed to extract a boarding pass. There was no fast-track lane. I found later on that there is an escorted fast-track service that can be purchased, but no conventional fast-track lane exists. So I joined the rather lengthy regular queue for security. Indeed, it was so lengthy we had to be buffered before the boarding pass gates for a few minutes. It took almost half an hour to get to the immigration desks, and it seemed like the questioning of departing passengers was very thorough, until it was my turn and I was through in about 3 seconds. At least the immigration checks were slower than the scanning security, so that process did not delay me any further. You go past the duty-free shop rather than through it, which endeared me to the airport somewhat, but that goodwill was rapidly lost as the signage for the lounges was terrible. Had I used the check-in desks, I'd have been able to ask where to go, but I wasn't sure which lounge was hosting Aeromexico passengers, and there was no signage to explain it. I tried the Avianca lounge, but the guy didn't know and directed me to the Copa Club right up the other end of the terminal. This was a Star Alliance lounge, which didn't feel right, and indeed wasn't right, but they did at least know and redirected me to the LATAM lounge, which is right back up the other end of the terminal again. My own fault for not working this out beforehand, but quite annoying nevertheless. But it turned out that the LATAM lounge was really rather good. It's not huge, but there was plenty of free seating. Champagne was available, as was wine and a selection of spirits. This was early afternoon and there were hot and cold food options, not a huge range or massive portions, but what I tried was very tasty. I passed an hour there very comfortably. And off to the gate, and our 2-year-old Boeing 737 MAX 8 was already on stand. This is the controversial plane type that had been launched with some serious flaws that led to 2 fatal crashes, which in turn led to the type being grounded for 18 months. It was my first flight on this type of plane, but after the scrutiny it's had over the last years, I had no concerns at all about flying on it. There's probably no safer plane in the sky. I was allocated to boarding group 1 and was called forward promptly. An official-looking chap intercepted me en route to the plane and asked me something in Spanish.
Don't speak Spanish.
Okay, no worries.
Thank you.
It can't have been important. And unusually for this trip, we were able to head straight onto the plane. Hashtag boarding actually boarding. So give Aeromexico a bonus point for being joined up here. And into the 4-row business cabin laid out in a 2-2 configuration. Seat 2F for me today. A decent-sized screen is in front of you with what looked like 2 literature slots. 38 inches of legroom, I believe, which was ample for this flight blocked to take just over 5 hours. A shared armrest and a seat recline button, only one axis of recline for this seat, which was fine for this day flight but would perhaps not be great on anything overnight. Below this is a handy storage space pre-stocked with headphones. The armrest flipped up and revealed a universal plug and USB port along with a remote for the TV. On the other side was the tray table, which did what you expect. It had a bonus flap feature, although I couldn't work out what it was for. And you can just about make out a footrest too, which is either fantastic or just a little bit annoying, depending on how tall you are. Overhead lights and an air vent, and the people did rejoice as they were happy. A pre-departure water was offered, nothing stronger, but this worked nicely. We pushed back pretty much bang on time, another bonus mark for Aeromexico, past an Iberia plane. Check out my review of the flight down to Bogota here. The safety video played, and I'm always fascinated by these. The Spanish language section came with an animation, the English section with live action. I'm tempted to draw some insights from that, but I'll let it pass. Bogota isn't a huge airport, but it still took 18 minutes to reach the end of the runway, and as the airport is nearly 9,000 feet in the air already, it was quite a long roll before we were airborne. I'll make a video about what I found in Bogota. I'm not sure I fell in love with the city, but I'd have no qualms about going back, and it's actually a fashionable place for digital nomads and those looking for a second residence. Not long after takeoff, we were reminded of Bogota's altitude when we reached some clouds already well below us. Service began about a half hour after takeoff. No dedicated drinks round first, and as usual, I'd love to know whether this is standard for Aeromexico. Lunch was delivered all on one tray. I don't think there was a menu. If there was, I've lost it. The choice was chicken or pasta, and the tray was delivered with a nice salad, a chicken and potato main course, with a cheesecake to finish. The chicken looked dry, but was okay. The sauce did help lubricate it though. Complemented by a decent glass of red wine, which was willingly refilled. Not the best in-flight meal I've ever had, but a long, long way from being the worst. No drinks menu either, but I asked for a whiskey, which turned out to be a Johnny Walker Black Label, which hit the spot. A tequila was also available. After dinner there was the opportunity to have a nap. I chose to stay awake though, and although a pillow and blanket was available, the seat recline was a bit limited, so I'm not sure how refreshed I would have been had I tried to sleep. The in-flight entertainment was good, not the widest range of movies I've ever seen, but as the primary language of the region is Spanish, there was a good range of English language entertainment available. The in-flight Wi-Fi was prominently advertised too. Probably reasonable value if you absolutely had to be connected. The free messaging was good enough for me. And the loo was snug, to say the least. It offered you what you needed without the space being cramped even further by the fripperies you sometimes find in business class loos. Our flight path was originally supposed to take us right over Central America, but there was quite a lot of very high cloud. It often extended well above our cruising altitude. This led the captain to deviate offshore to avoid the worst of it. You can see quite a few kinks in the flight path, which gives some idea of the amount of cloud he had to avoid. The flight was blocked to take 5 hours, but we descended into a darkening Mexico City and landed after only 4 hours and 5 minutes. I've said good but not great a few times in this review, which might give the impression that the experience was lacking, but I really enjoyed this flight. Even though some elements could have been better, overall it was a really pleasant experience that I enjoyed. Perhaps my expectations were abnormally low, as I have been so ground down by the ordinariness of mid-haul business class flights on narrow-body planes around Europe. Or perhaps it was down to the crew, who were superb, friendly, engaged, capable, and nothing felt like it was too much effort for them. Maybe Iberia should hire Aeromexico's crew. I needed to get to Mexico City to connect to my flight back to London, and had my choice of 4 airlines flying direct from Bogota. There was Aeromexico and Colombia's flag carrier Avianca, plus low-cost carriers Viva Aerobus and Volaris. Premium cabin flights make for better videos, and Aeromexico is the only airline offering a business cabin, so I picked them. I paid just over £400 for this flight, which was expensive, but it just fell within my ceiling of £100 per hour of premium cabin flying time. So we landed, and things went a bit odd. It was all quite hard to follow as things were mostly explained in Spanish, but we were early, so our gate was not ready. So we parked up somewhere. Then, after a while, we were redirected from Terminal 2 to Terminal 1, where we parked up and waited again. It turned out that no gate was available there either, so we ended up on a remote stand. Overall, it was 50 minutes after landing before the doors were opened, and of course a remote stand means a ride on a bus. And they clearly weren't expecting us at the terminal building, as we ended up being parked outside for another 10 minutes before they could get the door open. At least Mexican immigration was a breeze. There was no queue, and there's no landing cards required these days either. Then there was one last wait to get through the arrival security scanner, and I was out to enjoy the delights of Mexico City, which I'll talk about in a separate video a little later on. I like Mexico, and after this experience I also like Aeromexico. So thanks for watching, give this video a like. Have you flown on Aeromexico? Leave me a comment if you have, or if you're thinking of doing so after watching this. Please subscribe if you're new, and if you'd like to support what I'm doing, there's a Patreon account, the link to which is in the description below. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.